All right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show is our first proper new episode of 2020. Although, now that I think about it, we recorded this one right before New Year's, so I guess technically the next regular episode will be the first full-on 2020 episode. I don't know. I don't know how you really plan these things. I had a similar dilemma back when it was the end of our first year of podcasting and also the end of the first year of us podcasting, when it was like New Year's, but not quite the first year of... I tend to get into these things sometimes, and I really shouldn't. I should just talk about movies. Today, the movie we're talking about was my biggest, most anticipated movie of 2019. It is the Safdie Brothers' Uncut Gems starring Adam Sandler. I am such a huge fan of their film Good Time, and so I was really looking forward to this. And it met my expectations. I mean, honestly, I'm still kind of unpacking it and like really getting to the bottom of what all I feel about this movie, because it's a complicated one, but I loved it. And I had a great conversation with Kris Krainock, who joins me on this one to talk about a whole lot of puzzle pieces. We got a very big finished puzzle at the end, so get ready. We got a nice long conversation for you about Uncut Gems. It will not be as anxiety-inducing as the movie. Don't worry. You can just sit back and relax and enjoy it. But I do want to remind you before we jump into that, make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together on your podcast app of choice. If you like what you hear on the show, you can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or on Podchaser. And, of course, follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. So let's get into this conversation about the Safdie Brothers' Uncut Gems. Today's episode is sponsored by the Golden Tiki, recently named one of the top tiki bars in the United States by the Food Network, and also one of the top 10 best nightlife destinations in Las Vegas by USA Today. They've got great rum, mixed drinks, and of course the Dole Whip. They've got theme nights, DJs, all kinds of fun stuff, including Al and Bud's Oasis, who are two robotic parrots that put on a great show every hour on the hour. So next time you're in Las Vegas, make sure to check out the Golden Tiki on Spring Mountain. All right, back on the show today, we've got Kris Krainock. How's it going, man?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right, man. Just wrapping up this year. There's so many movies that they have to just squeeze in at the last minute, and it's just so difficult to cover them all, you know?
Yeah, award season.
And just, it's... why do they have to do this to us, man? I feel like Adam Sandler in this movie, like rushing from theater to theater trying to see all this shit, you know?
Yeah, you should definitely wear fake teeth. So I think that would help.
Squint my eyes a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Give me another chance. All right, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, man. So Uncut Gems. I was super excited for this movie. As you know, Good Time is one of my favorite movies of this decade.
Mm-hmm.
I love that movie so much. And I hadn't actually seen any of the Safdie's other work. I'm sure we'll end up talking about it as we get into this conversation. I've gone back and watched Heaven Knows What since seeing Uncut Gems.
Mm-hmm.
But how about you? Were you super psyched for this one?
Oh, yeah. So I had seen Heaven Knows What, which I think by comparison of Good Time and Uncut Gems was kind of like minor Safdie. I think they were still kind of finding their way.
Sure.
And I think they were fully realized with Good Time.
Yeah.
Good Time really blew my mind. And I was really excited about Uncut Gems because of the potential that I thought that I had seen in Good Time, you know?
Sure.
And of course, there was all this hype about the central performance of Adam Sandler and all that stuff. And that we go through this thing every few years whenever he makes like a good movie, and we're like, oh my God, he's a good actor.
Yeah.
Like the same, conversation we've had like 5 other times.
And people forget every time.
Every single time. That's what happens when you make Grown Ups 11.
You're right. Yeah.
It's his fault, really, I'd say. So yeah, I was really excited. I was a little worried, actually, because Good Time was such an exercise in style and such a successful exercise in style that I was really hoping that they wouldn't just come back and then like do the same thing again.
Yeah.
Which they did and they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I was pleasantly surprised that it was, to me, it felt like growth, while still being very much in that style, which I think they now inhabit. That kind of, they now have like a a thing that nobody else has.
It's so much a Safdie Brothers movie with a little more money.
With more money, but without the common problem of like solving problems with money instead of creatively, which so many successful stories end that way, where like they have a great movie that they've made on 10 cents and then they get the whole world given to them and they just blow it because they start solving the problems with money and not creatively. This still feels like it's cheap. Yeah. But in the best way possible. Right. That's not a criticism.
Absolutely.
It still feels like they were like, it's all running on adrenaline and passion. Yeah. But I even think it's more sophisticated in a story sense, but we'll talk about that more.
Sure, yeah. This is going to be a long conversation. I already know. I mean, this is my most awaited movie of the year, so I'm definitely looking forward to talking about it. And I know we discussed ahead of time. You got a lot of pieces, so why don't we jump in and get to your first puzzle piece?
All right, so I want to get a couple puzzle pieces out of the way, just because I feel like they're slightly obligatory. I want to say PTA, Punch Drunk Love / Heart 8. So the thing about Punch Drunk Love, I'll just touch on it briefly because I think the only similarity is in the genius of the casting. I think both PTA and the Safdie brothers, not only did they know how to harvest the potential of Adam Sandler as a performer, but there's something else that I think is one level more genius, which is that they knew they had a very unlikable character with Howard. They knew that in Uncut Gems, they needed to elicit some sympathy for us to want to keep watching this guy make worse and worse decisions. And I think it was kind of a stroke of genius, either from the Safdies, which I think it is from them, because they wanted him like 10 years ago when they first imagined this film, but also maybe from the casting director or whoever was in that conversation. Because when we look at Adam Sandler, we have a very hard time separating Happy Gilmore.
Right.
Yes, he disappeared into Howard, but he didn't disappear entirely.
He's a lovable sociopath.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's just something, and this is not something that narrative storytelling or the craftsmanship of the filmmaking, they didn't try to manipulate us into having empathy for the character. It was just something that he exudes in his performance unconsciously. I think he played the roughest and most intense character he could, but just because of who he is, we were sucked in and had this other emotional connection. So I think that was kind of either they lucked into it or that was a very wise decision that both PTA and the Safdie brothers, used in their films, and that's how I feel they're connected. And then of course Heart 8, kind of superficially, that it's a lot about gambling and that kind of that arena. So I think the work of PTA though and is definitely connected, and his vision for Sandler is a big part of their vision for Sandler.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they clearly did, for that Punch Drunk Love, which I also have on my list of pieces. It's a movie where they clearly had a vision of this is what we know and love about Adam Sandler, and let's write to those strengths, but in a different way that we haven't really quite seen before. And I think PTA did that with Punch Drunk Love. I think he saw something in him and went for it,
Yeah, I mean, PTA has said that, like, he's like, oh, I really like Adam Sandler films. I kind of turn my brain off, and if I want to just kind of have fun, I watch an Adam Sandler movie. And I think he even described Punch Drunk Love as an art house Adam Sandler movie.
Right.
Like, he actually used that, those kind of phrases to describe his own film. So I think he knew like the kind of the bottled up rage. And I recently went back and reread Roger Ebert's review of Punch Drunk Love, and it was basically talking about why he doesn't like all the other Adam Sandler films. It's like that he's basically this angry, rage-filled, person. Yeah. And he takes it out on juvenile comedy. And then in PTA's film, he was able to explore that in a more kind of delicate and deep way. And it's funny, is I'll just be honest, I'm not a huge Punch Drunk Love fan. I know that's sacrilege to a lot of film nerds or buffs or whatever, but I found it irritating, and I found it overly Paul Thomas Anderson, I guess. He's much more talented than I think most of his films would suggest, and so I have a kind of love-hate with him. But it's time to revisit it, I think. I want to really focus more on Adam Sandler's performance and give that its due. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that movie. And what? One last thing before moving on, just the idea of writing for a performer who's mostly known for comedy. You know who else they were going for after Adam Sandler walked away from the project?
I heard about it. Who?
Yeah, Sacha Baron Cohen.
Oh wow!
Yeah, they even got to like table reads and everything, and like it was very possibly going to happen when Adam Sandler couldn't do it or didn't want to do it actually at first. And so, yeah, that was going to be their second choice, and a whole host of other basketball players that they had in mind.
I hadn't heard about Cohen. I'd heard about Jonah Hill.
Jonah Hill, I believe, was for one of the other roles, maybe though, or maybe it was for that role.
I think he was for Howard originally.
Yeah,
and then because I think I don't know the lineage entirely, but I think Adam Sandler passed on it.
Right.
And then Jonah Hill was up for it either before Cohen or after.
Yeah.
And then Sandler finally took on the role.
Yeah, he passed 3 times.
I think it scared him.
Yeah,
I
would imagine.
I really did. Even though we see it as like kind of like a logical extension of his talent, and that in a way, Uncut Gems is very much like a serious Sandler film, in the same way Punch Drunk Love was.
Yeah.
And it kind of orbits his whole thing. I don't know if he really saw it in himself.
Yeah.
I saw an interview with him and Brad Pitt, and he talked about how like he dreaded the more emotional days. That it was like he was hoping it was last on the schedule on the call sheet because he didn't know if he could bring it.
Right.
So I think his comfort zone is comedy. I think films like this, which he makes seem effortless, are not though. I think they're not effortless for him.
Right.
It seems, but he gave us phenomenal performance.
Oh yeah, he absolutely crushed it. All right, I'm gonna go to my first puzzle piece, which is actually a trio of movies, all from Darren Aronofsky. I'm gonna start off with Requiem for a Dream for just that constant progression of shit going from bad to worse. The Wrestler being this guy who you just know he's not going to stop until it kills him. And then Mother, which just this movie is. One of the things that I love so much about Mother, which is, one of my favorite movies of the last decade, is just on a technical level, it's like you're just kind of in awe watching it and watching how much he was balancing and making that movie, how many things with the choreography and the sound and the cinematography and everything coming together in a way that's like, how the fuck are they doing this, And that's the feeling I get from Uncut Gems, especially in the sound department, but really in every department. But the idea that they're able to balance so much happening at once, and it's chaos, but it's chaos that is still something you can follow along with, and that you feel like you understand what's happening, despite the fact that everything is just so freaking increasingly crazy, and so much happening at once is just magical almost.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. A lot of things I've read about the film is that people find it unwatchable. For the most part, it's been critically acclaimed.
Yeah.
But I think the average audience member is very split. A couple of people walked out of the screening that I was in. I think some people find it too grating. It's too intense for them. And to touch on your puzzle piece, I think Darren Aronofsky and the Safdies have something in common, which is that they're kind of intrigued by these character studies. A lot of their films are not large ensemble pieces, but they are about one type of person, usually a person who's spiraling downward or out of control.
Sure.
And yet the world around them is such a vivid and realized place.
Right.
Which they do that cinematically, through their ability to speak cinematically, through their craft. They really flesh out the world around it and make it feel palpable and make it feel real. And yet it never kind of strays away from being this one-man show or this one-person show.
Right.
Which kind of brings me to my puzzle piece to kind of, roll off of yours a little.
Sure.
Although I want to get back to the sound department on another puzzle piece. But
okay.
Right now I'm going to slip in on the one-person strategy, which is going to be the work of Marty Scorsese.
Sure.
The films in particular, Raging Bull and Casino, but also The King of Comedy. Raging Bull, for the obvious reason, I think it's about a self-destructive character. It's about a person. It's a character study on one person and the flaws, their Achilles heel that just destroys them. So I think there's a lot. I think Raging Bull is a blueprint for a lot of filmmakers that have this kind of very singular vision about a character. It's such a masterfully brilliant tragedy. Then you have Casino again for this kind of the energy. I think the Safdies were compared a lot to Scorsese with Good Time, of Mean Streets, and things like that. So I think, and then Scorsese even executive produced Uncut Gems.
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw his name. I didn't realize that ahead of time.
Yeah, he always has his hands on a lot of pies.
Does.
While he's doing stuff. He's also doing the new Marvel shit. I'm just kidding. No, no. So I think he saw their the influence that he had on them through Good Time, and maybe wanted to kind of step in and help them go to a new level, which is
Yeah.
really cool of him to do. But yeah, so I see the energy of Scorsese in their work. I think the gritty 1970s New York is also right out of Scorsese's playbook.
Yeah.
That the Safdies really want their films to feel like they're not necessarily dated, but they are not in 2019. You know what I
Sure.
mean? He doesn't have AirPods in or anything. He uses a cell phone and everything, but now it just kind of bleeds into this grain, this texture that makes it feel like the
It's a very
70s.
specific moment, the what they're capturing there. I mean, and it's very, very accurate. For as quick as things are moving, you're catching little bits and pieces of things from the technology they use to just the look of the clothes and everything. Like, I mean, it's really very specific, you know?
Well, what's I thought was really interesting is that they decided to make it in 2012.
Right.
The fact that it's a recent period piece, which at maybe first glance doesn't feel like it is necessary,
Mhm.
but at the same, I think having walked away and thought about it, I think it's a crucial part of their vision
Yeah.
because this guy is almost a relic.
Mhm.
And the thing is, the Howard character, I mean, it's very real, it's very modern, and yet I feel like a couple of years ago, this story would have been more realistic than it is maybe in 2019. Maybe things are a little too easy. Communication and knowing where people are every second is a little bit too much for this kind of story. A
Right.
worm like Howard benefits from not having a GPS tracker on him at all times.
Sure.
So yeah, this kind of recent period piece was really interesting, and I feel it's kind of a Scorsese move, kind of feels like a creative flourish.
Yeah.
And yet, in hindsight, it really helps put the whole puzzle together.
Sure.
And then the last thing I'll mention about King of Comedy, besides it being kind of darkly humorous,
Sure.
is that they cast a serious actor to play a comedian. They cast Robert De Niro as a kind of a crazy lunatic Jerry Lewis type. And now in this, they reverse that and they cast a comedian for a very serious role.
Sure.
So I think there's some kind of connection there as well.
Absolutely. I will, just jump right into my next puzzle piece, which goes right along with that, The Wolf of Wall Street.
Okay.
I mean, this movie, it's, the excess of this character and like the kind of greed level. I mean, the chasing the win, the
Yeah.
constant need for more winning, and one of my favorite things in this movie, and it's like kind of a small thing about it, but is when he's at home, like his family, his kids, like those shitty kids. Like, I love it. And I mean, those kids they seem like they're growing up right in his same footsteps, and they've got like all the shit they could imagine. And I just love that. It's so funny. And those kids they do such a great job of playing that. I know those kids, you know what I mean?
Sure.
From growing up, from my Jew camp, Like, I know those kids, and I love that whole thing. And they just get whatever the hell they want, and they're going to. You could imagine them going through life just expecting more and more and more, winning and winning and winning, and excess, which reminded me of that drive in The Wolf of Wall Street.
No, I can definitely see that, and I think it's great mentioning the kids because the daughter in particular, who just feels like she has his number.
Yeah.
Like she just knows that he's full of shit.
Yeah.
And that whatever he says doesn't really matter because he's not going to be doing what he said he's going to be doing. And she feels very entitled, but at the same time, it makes him feel like a real character. I think one of the things the Safdies are good at is not making a narrative that is very predictable,
Mm-hmm.
which I think a lot of people find. A lot of people who aren't ready to kind of take the ride can find it superficial, but I think there's a lot of breadcrumbs that make these people feel real. Again, Howard felt very real to me. And I
Yeah.
think one of the ways that they succeeded in doing that is to give that little moment in the kitchen scene where he's like trying to compliment his daughter, but it's just so empty. He's just
Yeah.
trying to like talk to her for 5 seconds so that he can justify that he's a good dad.
Right. He's trying to convince himself.
Right. He's
Yeah.
just like, I'm really proud of you. And she's like, you've already said that 5 times. He's like, well, I just wanted to say it again.
Yeah.
Like he's just doing it because he knows he's a shit dad.
Yeah.
And she knows that he's a shit dad, and they both know. There's no, nothing, no
Yeah.
fantasy here.
Yeah.
But he's just saying it so that he can feel better about himself. So a moment like that makes him feel like a really well-rounded, full character, and that leaves a lot of the expositional scenes that you find in most movies. You get them out of the way.
Yeah.
Now that I connect so intensely to this guy, I don't need to go and get his backstory and why he is the way that he is. He's just an absolute. He just is what he is, and we can feel that. So I think that even like a Jordan Belfort type character, I think Scorsese has a more classical approach to his storytelling, to where you get these very big, ambitious worlds. Where Wolf of Wall Street, and it's almost like an X-rated Forrest Gump. You know what I mean? When I think about Scorsese's like really in-depth stories, they're like they kind of have a classical design to them, where Safdie's have kind of cut through the bullshit and they do it really quickly, and it's all through the energy. But no, I can definitely see the connection of greed and money and just how that drives people, and just interesting.
Sure, absolutely. Well, what do you got for your next piece?
So I want to go back to the sound department for a second, because I think one of the most important influences here is the work of Robert Altman, and a great director, and two films in particular. The first one being California Split, which is kind of an unloved gem. Little wink, wink. How about that terrible pun? Huh? An unloved gem from Robert Altman. I'm sorry, everybody.
I love it.
It is. It's an overlooked gem of his repertoire, as they say. But it's about a gambling addict. And it's about always looking for that next win. And it's, even though there's some highs, there's also some really bad lows. And then another film called The Player, which is a great film, kind of the insider stuff about Hollywood. And the reason I bring that up is because I feel like Uncut Gems shows us the inside of this network, this diamond, 47th Street in New York. It's like a whole culture. It's a whole world, these diamond peddlers. I spoke to a gentleman that I know from New York, he's an older guy, and he was like, if you ever wanted a diamond, you went down to 47th Street. It's like a whole idea. It's a whole thing. Yeah. And even Sandler went and spent time with those guys. So I feel like the way that we kind of got an inside track on Hollywood, we also got this inside track of this diamond business from this film.
Sure.
Again, it has the Aronofsky obsession of like, we're going to follow one guy around, or the Jake LaMotta Raging Bull of like, this is about one person. But the world is so sketched and so brilliant. And then when it comes to sound design, Robert Altman famously loved characters speaking over each other. So you have these movies like Nashville and Gosford Park and all these excellent films that he made. McCabe and Miss Miller. One of his most famous strategies is having characters overlapping. He had these large ensemble casts.
Yeah.
Unlike the Safdies, right? They kind of do the opposite. But they took a play out of his playbook. And I think you mentioned to me that they had 60 pages of ADR.
Right. Yeah. I listened to this fascinating interview with them. I mean, it's just crazy. They're saying about how I think it was Scott Rudin, the producer, was like, are you people serious? Like when they and like entire roles that aren't there, like new roles just out of ADR, and it's wild.
Yeah, that's right from Altman.
Yeah.
Altman's technique. He deliberately made his films rated R. He would add a couple of fucks so that kids couldn't go see his movies. Yeah. Not being, he just didn't want to have to pander from a marketing standpoint for kids, but he also made stuff that was more adult. And and they were challenging to the audience. He deliberately tested you, and one of the ways he did that was through his sound design.
Yeah.
And I think the Safdies saw the value in that for the type of world they wanted to create. I think that they definitely are influenced by California Split, and I'm sure they love Altman. And I think that was something that was conscious, in my opinion.
Yeah, they brought up Altman in that interview I listened to. Absolutely. Cool. So yeah, you're 100% on with that. And yeah, I mean that is such a New York thing too.
People screaming over each other.
Yeah, nonstop talking and screaming in the background. Yeah. So
it gives a lot of standard viewers, people that just go to the movies for fun, they don't realize often, and they're not supposed to. This is not disparaging to them in any way. They're not supposed to notice, but how much a film works on you subconsciously.
Sure.
It works on you abstractly. There's so many things. They call it movie magic, and a lot of big reason of that is that you're able to elicit emotions out of people without really giving them all the cards, without showing them all the ways that you're manipulating them.
Yeah.
Manipulation has such a negative connotation, but a lot of good art, and film in particular, which enters you on such an emotional level, not an intellectual level, it's manipulative, and I think to a positive result. If the film is done well, or has something interesting to say, or is important artistically, or has integrity, it's a good thing. And I think the tension you feel, how tense could you feel watching Adam Sandler quickly walk down a sidewalk?
Right.
But with all, his performance definitely lent itself to the stress factor of the film. But the sound design, the visuals, the lighting, all of that stuff is working on you unconsciously to to pucker up your ass as you watch the movie. So the
Right.
dialogue, I think, is one of the more egregious strokes because you can hear it and it has a kind of a calamity about it.
Right.
But again, you wouldn't really process it as something nerve shredding the way that it is.
Sure.
So it's really a stroke of craftsmanship. I was pretty impressed with the film from a lot of different reasons, but also for young directors, their command of the craft.
Well, that's the main thing. I mean, before I move on to my next piece, that's the main thing. When I walked out of this movie, I'm like, I definitely liked this, but I mean, I'm sitting there, comparing it to Good Time, and I'm like, how much it was my most anticipated movie of the year, how much I like it. But as I've been just going back over and over the craft of this thing, and like, how the hell do they pull all this off? Like I said earlier with the mother puzzle piece, I mean, I get a lot of that kind of vibe of like, how the hell do you make this happen?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just wild.
it's cool.
So for my next puzzle piece, I'm gonna go with I don't know if this is I consider it a little minor classic from the year 2000.
Ooh.
It is a movie called Boiler Room. You remember this movie?
I remember Boiler Room.
Ben Affleck, Giovanni Ribisi,
Giovanni
Vin Diesel.
Ribisi.
Oh man, and I mean they're
Vin Diesel.
Vin Diesel's best role when he showed promise of being a good actor.
Oh,
I mean,
Dreamcast.
God damn.
I love Boiler Room.
But yeah, just this fly-by-night brokerage firm, and they're just all just going at it so crazy. There a lot of that over, people just going nuts in the background, all kinds of crosstalk happening as they're screwing people out of their money, and yeah, you get a lot of that just like crazy adrenaline-filled energy in that movie. That win-win-win-win-win energy, like again with like I was saying with Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
And but then again, some of that Altman thing of the overlap, and there's just constant stuff happening in that room as they're all trying to make their deals and screw people,
Yeah, I mean, now that I think about it, Boiler Room is almost like Oliver Stone, Martin Scorsese, and Robert Altman had an amazing baby.
Yeah.
Which I'd like to watch that if possible. Watch those three go at it and make a child.
But
But if that were humanly possible, biologically possible, I think you'd probably have Boiler Room.
Now I'm just thinking about that image.
Me too. Let's just take a moment of silence to reflect on that. Now,
people listening at home, he's staring at me as he says, "Me too."
Sweat rolled down my temple. No, I'm so tempted to go into an aside all about Vin Diesel, but I will, in the interest of time, I will save it for next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one very quick thing. Kris and I are going to be recording soon in the next week or two a special episode on the movies that are not our top 10 of the decade, but are movies that we think are going to be people are going to continue to talk about 20, 30, 40 years from now. Not our favorite movies, not the best picture winners, not the biggest box office. This is the kind of movie I'm talking about from the decade previous is Boiler Room. It's the kind of movie, it's like it wasn't the biggest thing in the world, but everybody is still, not everybody, but people who love movies still talk about it.
Yeah, it's like when you went to Blockbuster and you always saw it on the shelf.
Yeah.
It was still released on VHS.
Yeah.
And you just always saw that. I could see Giovanni Ribisi standing right now on the cover.
Yeah.
With like a green outline.
Yeah.
I could see it in my mind. That's actually interesting. Yeah, we're going to bring that up is like what kind of movies will stick in our craw for so long. That's hard to predict.
It is. It's very hard.
It's so tempting to say the biggest movie or your favorite movie. And we're going to I'm trying to make a very credible list and see. Then maybe 10 years from now when we're still making this podcast, we'll come back and see if we were right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
I think Uncut Gems might be on there.
It's very, very possible. Yeah. So what do you got for your next piece?
Man, Boiler Room. Great piece.
All right.
Mine might stole the show. So I'm going to bring up a great French filmmaker, a guy named Bresson, which I've mentioned on the podcast before, kind of a realist master. Mm-hmm. 3 films from him, Pickpocket, A Man Escaped, and L'Argent. And it's just he's one of the great social realism directors. He used a lot of non-actors the way that the Safdies do. A lot of people in Uncut Gems are actually first-time acting, and the fact that they have this kind of plodding, simplistic plot, and yet somehow you don't see the end coming. And the thing about Uncut Gems is like the ending is so obvious. only after you see it.
Right.
As soon as, but when it happens, my mouth was agape. I was shocked.
Yeah.
And that's a very Bresson thing. He made these movies, like for instance, A Man Escaped is just the very simple, basic execution of a man escaping from a prison. And the title of the movie gives the suspense away. A man escaped, and that's the title. And you watch a man escape. That's it. And yet, it's riveting. And it's not punchy. It's not overly complicated. There's not a lot of editing tricks. It's paced and simple and straightforward and almost poetic. I think what the Safdies take from him is the simplicity of their plots, not necessarily their energies. Bresson is a much more meditative type filmmaker. Pickpocket, another kind of crime, urban, social commentary story. His final film about not Pickpocket, but L'Argent was his final film about someone passing a phony bill and how someone else gets held responsible and how they soon spiral out into a violent act because their whole life was taken away from a mistake. So these kind of basic, simple, easy, elegant concepts, and that then are just done and they're just executed.
Right.
There's not a lot of showy flashiness, and yet because they're so simple, they end up becoming very riveting. And also, inevitability becomes surprising, which I think the Safdies do amazing. Just like Bresson, he made inevitability somehow surprising. And I think that was, in my opinion, when I watched Good Time, I had no idea how it was going to end.
Right.
And I think there was more of a surprise, although he gets arrested. And that's in hindsight. Again, it's not that shocking.
Right.
They didn't really throw us like a curveball with their narrative.
Right.
But we still had no idea how it was going to end. I was 30 minutes out until the end of Uncut Gems, and I was like, how is this going to end?
Yeah.
What's going to happen? And yet, what happened, I don't want to ruin it. I know people would usually watch the movie by the time they listen to this podcast.
Sure.
The ending is still juicy enough. I won't just come out right and say it.
Okay.
But when I saw that, I was shocked.
Yes.
And then 5 seconds after, I was like, of course. So that's a really amazing trick to pull off, is to give us something so simple and so basic and so direct, and yet still have it be completely surprising.
Yeah.
And so Bresson was a master of that. Totally different energy, totally different style, but I think they definitely take a play out of his book in terms of their stripped down narratives, their really inevitable stories, and yet their total command of surprise.
I like the word inevitable. It really goes to what makes it such a great ending,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
How could it have not ended that way?
Right, exactly.
As soon as, like I said, I was, oh my God. And then 2 seconds later, I was like, well, yeah, duh. That didn't take away from the wonderful, the element of this, the ending. I wasn't disappointed. I mean, when I say duh, I mean well, yeah, I should have figured that out.
Yeah.
And yet I was still had my nails in the seat being like, what is going to happen to Howard? How is he going to get out of this?
Yeah.
And that's just a really impressive thing when you don't have a lot of narrative tricks. I mean, when you watch a movie like Inception, you're like, yeah, who the hell knows what's going to happen?
Right.
We're in the fifth dream. Is he is he old? Is he young? What's going to happen? I don't know. But you watch this movie and it's like Howard's just fucking up.
Yeah.
And the ending is so inevitable.
Yeah.
And yet I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, I didn't see that coming. How could I not have?
Right.
That's a pretty amazing trick.
It is.
And Bresson was a total master of that.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, for my next puzzle piece, I am going to go with 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh my God, man after my own heart.
I think there's a certain element to this movie of a kind of zooming in and then zooming back out on a micro macro level.
Okay.
You're looking at this one story of this jewel dealer. And then you're looking at the guy, the basketball player that he sells the jewel to, and how that's this big thing that the world is watching. Nobody's watching Howard. He's just this
Right.
one guy.
Cog in the wheel.
Yeah, and then on that bigger level is the world watching this basketball player. And then in the beginning and the end, we get the cosmos inside the gem, and so it's like you're going all the way out to that. But then you also come back in the introduction in Africa to the gem first being mined, and so you're getting another area of what's happening within this big grander story, And so it's just all these different levels of the story of all these people and things that are touched by the gem, basically. And so I just think that in that way, it's like you're getting all these different bigger and smaller views of what's happening with this story.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. I hadn't put it together, and I actually have no Kubrick puzzle pieces on this. So wow! So thank you for letting me talk about it for 5 seconds.
There you
I think
go.
you do this for mercy. This is a mercy piece.
This is a mercy piece
that I can then talk about. No, and I think you have a very compelling argument of why that is the way that it is, or why you think that puzzle piece is appropriate. The thing about 2001 is that it works predominantly as a metaphor. It has a extremely engaging narrative, but it's also very simplistic and very basic. It's essentially a silent film. What works best about 2001 and why it's so iconic is because of its ideas.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it also keeps them abstract enough to keep us interested and curious.
And
I think that in a less literal way, I can see how that gem is representative of something bigger and how it kind of connects everything.
Yeah.
It's in a way, it's like a MacGuffin.
Sure.
It's very much a MacGuffin, very much like the monolith. The monolith can almost be considered a MacGuffin, something that sets the action in play.
Yeah.
Not only narratively, but all of mankind in this instant. In 2001,
it's a big movie.
It's a big MacGuffin.
Yeah.
But no. So it's very very interesting, and I can definitely see that. And I like, to me, it's like the fact that it's a MacGuffin. It almost has it harkens back to like an earlier genre of film, which is like it has the treasure.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's almost like, I read an interesting article that I'm happy you brought this up because I would have forgotten to mention it, but I think it was a review of some sort, and they were talking about how it's like this movie about Howard in 2012 in the New York Jewel District is like the same guy. What drove people to look for Atlantis? It's what drove people to look for El Dorado.
Right.
It's like it's the same basic impulse that turns men crazy.
Right.
Looking for gold.
Yeah.
And it's like this, and again, it's another way to look at Uncut Gems as this ultra simplification of even narrative storytelling, of film, film theory. Because obviously these guys are film fanatics. Right? They watch a lot of cinema. And again, I don't know if this is conscious of them. I don't know if they did this on purpose, but they almost harkened back to El Dorado. Not that was not one of my puzzle pieces as a movie, but it could very easily be one.
Sure.
And I think it's tapping into what you're talking about with what 2001 taps in. With 2001, it's about human potential. It's about where are we going to go? What are, Stanley always made films that are contrarian in a lot of ways. He was interested in how our greatest feats, our greatest accomplishments were also our downfall. Because if we were, the greater we get, the more inhuman we become, right? HAL 9000 is their greatest accomplishment, and yet it's a human computer.
Yeah.
So it's distancing ourselves. Like the greater we get, the less human we become. And the only way that we can defeat this Achilles heel or this paradox is by moving beyond it, which that's represented in the Star Child, right? We go to the next level of human evolution, and Dave becomes the baby, the next step. And so there's always these kind of human paradoxes in Stanley's films. And I can even see that right in Uncut Gems, especially if you look at it at this macro level, this huge, big, wide, stepping back level.
Yeah.
And think of it, again, almost like, the treasure of the Sierra Madre, or like, it's just really cool. It's a cool puzzle piece. Got me all nerdy. So I don't think I'm making any more sense, so I'll wrap it up. But that's interesting. You're knocking it out of the park.
Knocking them out. Real quick before we move on, I briefly, that's kind of the first time I think we've even talked about the basketball element of this. I mean, I know neither of us are sports people, but Kevin Garnett is freaking great in this as a non-actor.
Yeah.
So good.
I was really impressed.
I loved him in this.
Yeah. I mean, that's really cool, a really cool thing.
Yeah.
I think that was awesome that they chose to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't know, like, I don't care enough to look into it, but I was like, I wonder if there was really like an important game in 2012.
Yeah, I think it was.
Okay.
From my understanding of it, but then again, I don't know shit about sports. So
yeah, I'm with Scorsese. Anything with a ball, no good. I think it's one of his quotes.
Nice. He's a smart guy.
Yeah. So no Marvel and no balls.
Nice. All right, what do you got next?
Oh, that wasn't my puzzle piece.
No, that was me, baby.
I'm sorry, I hijacked it. I'm sorry. I bet everyone listening was like, "Oh shit, he mentioned 2001." Shut up. So I'm gonna make so there's another underrated film that is very sadly underseen that I'm gonna mention a movie called Owning Mahoney.
Yeah.
And it's about a gambling addict. And it's a fierce performance by Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Sure.
Have you seen the film?
Yeah, they actually had a screening at an addiction film festival here in Vegas.
Whoa.
Yeah, like 5-6 years ago. One of my music videos that deals with addiction played there. Yeah.
That is bizarre.
I know.
That has threw me for a loop.
I know, but yeah, no, that's a great movie.
Yeah, it's it's made by a great filmmaker, a guy named Richard Kwiatniowski. It's a hard time pronouncing that name, but he made another movie, which is one of my all-time favorites, called Love and Death on Long Island, with John Hurt and Jason Priestley. Weird movie, so homoerotic, absolutely fantastic film. And he also made Owning Mahoney, and both those films, he's only made 2 feature films, which is a tragedy. He should make more, or someone should let him make more, is what I should say. But they're about men that are obsessed. They're about obsession. And I think a lot of that there's a lot of connective tissue there with the Safdies. I'm a big person who's inspired by obsession-based characters. One of the reasons why that is because you can justify almost anything through obsession. People will do anything to satisfy or to scratch that itch.
Sure.
Or to explore their obsession further. So you have a lot of unpredictability built into characters when you drive them through obsession.
Yeah.
Again, searching for ways to make things less cliched, less trite, looking for ways to make things feel fresher and more original is usually by playing, with the structure, mixing things up a little bit, keeping us guessing. And a character driven by obsession is wonderful to do that. Gambling addiction, a more common understood version of obsession, kind of a crystallized version of obsession, is how it takes the form in these 2 movies, Owning Mahoney and Uncut Gems. That's interesting about Uncut Gems is it's also kind of a crime film. Owning Mahoney is a crime film in the sense that he steals money. He becomes a thief.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. This character, all his emotions are beneath the surface. Philip Seymour Hoffman's. It's all underneath that pale, piggish exterior that he had. To where in Uncut Gems is right on his sleeve. You see the desperation in Adam's eyes. So that's kind of a different approach to the addiction. One's keeping it together until it's too late, and then one's never together. One's you're losing it. But I think the same obsession drives them. And it's a bird's eye view into the idea of gambling addiction. Sure. And I want to just mention it because people should seek it out and watch it. Love and Death on Long Island and also Owning Mahoney, 2 fantastic, underrated, underseen films.
All right. Yeah, I've never seen Love and Death on Long Island.
It's a gem.
Yeah?
It's an uncut gem.
All right.
No, it's seriously such a great movie. It's about an English novelist who happens to walk into the wrong movie theater and see a bad teen comedy, like in the vein of like Porky's, and Jason Priestley is playing a shitty B-list actor, not dissimilar to Jason Priestley.
Yeah.
And and the novelist, who's been married, whose wife is now dead, just falls in love with him. And has all these latent homosexual feelings that he never really knew or confronted. And he then goes to Long Island. He travels there and then befriends him and secretly it becomes obsessed with him, and then he confesses love to him. And Jason Priestley's like, "Whoa, I'm just some actor. You're a crazy old British guy."
Yeah.
It's one of John Hurt's most beautiful performances. It's a great movie, and terribly underseen.
Sounds great, man. All right, I'm gonna go with another gambling movie, and it's one that I haven't seen in a long time, and I'm sure there's much better gambling movies that could be used as puzzle pieces, but I thought of Rounders.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which is just an extreme, addiction to gambling kind of a movie. Don't really have that much more to say to it. It's just I was thinking about what are some, great gambling movies of the last, 20, 30 years, and that one's always stood out to me as just the the patheticness of it, you know what I mean? Of just being just stuck in that cycle and just no way to get out.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, Rounders is actually a pretty good little movie.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a while, but I like that film. And what's interesting about all addiction is that when you're not in the addiction, they all seem so frivolous.
Right.
Not to speak ill of the dead, but kind of bringing back to Philip Seymour Hoffman is he died in the late 2000s or the early 2010s or whatever from heroin addiction.
Yeah.
And I was like, how glam. What is this, 1970?
Right.
I was like, cat's out of the bag on heroin, Phil.
Yeah.
We know that it's not a good drug. You know what I mean? What were you doing?
Yeah.
Now, of course, that's a glib, silly, thing. I don't truly feel that way, and I feel terrible for him and his family that lost him. But it's like we know what all these, to me it's easy to not try heroin.
Right.
It's like I don't really bump into a lot of heroin. That's not really kind of my thing.
Right.
Only recently did I find out that cocaine is such a recreational drug for people like on Thursday night going to TGI Fridays.
Right.
Getting into the booger sugar. I thought you had to be Scarface. I thought you had to murder Colombians.
You just turned 30, right?
Just turned 30.
I think I was around 30 when I found that out too.
I had no idea. I was out with friends at like a Chili's, and they wanted some cocaine. I was like, what?
I had the same awakening. I was like, wait, what? What are you?
Are you
serious?
A drug dealer? They're like, no. And I was like, do you have a gun?
Are you wearing a wire?
Yeah, do you have a gun on you? Or is someone after you? And so, I had no idea that it was so recreational. But, again, that's another aside. But, I don't really bump into heroin too often. So, when I think, and you and I live in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
The gambling addiction capital of the world.
Yeah.
Where they let you cash your paychecks at the casino.
Yeah.
Which is super fucked. Mm-hmm. So that you can go and spend it and gamble it all away. And I've never been tempted. I've maybe played the slot machines like twice in my entire life. I don't think I've ever done a card game.
Yeah.
It's for us. I think it's easy to look at this and see how silly it is.
Yeah.
But any illness, all kidding aside, any illness, it defies logic.
Sure.
It goes so far beyond practicality, so far beyond being logical, and it just becomes this very strange thing, which is another reason why I think it's primed to make movies about.
Sure.
It's I don't think a film like Uncut Gems or even Rounders is a little bit much more softer mainstream version of it, but I don't think that they really glamorize addiction.
Yeah.
Uncut Gems is challenging, and it makes you kind of pity these people. I don't know if you have empathy for Howard, kind of going back to what we talked about because of Adam Sandler's performance or just who he is. We have an empathy, but there's also just a pity.
Yeah, there's definitely pity. I mean, he's just so damn charismatic, though, and that's the reason why maybe you do a little bit, have empathy for him. But it's, it's that character, though. I mean, Jesus,
Yeah,
shitty,
interesting.
Yeah. All right, what do you got for your next piece?
So I'm gonna go with a really excellent film called Naked, filmed by Mike Leigh.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that these guys, the Safdies, are very influenced by Mike Leigh. Mike Leigh is kind of a giant of the social realism movement. Life is Sweet is another great film of his. He made a lot of great movies about these average British Americans, average UKers, and the kind of the political and economical plight that they're in. But Naked in particular is kind of the rougher, gruffer, edgier slime ball side of it, and not about a wonderful person. So again, it's kind of a character study, but the world is so fleshed out because it's part of that social realism British subgenre.
Right.
And it's just really tough, really hard film about hard people living a hard life, and it's kind of foul and disgusting in a lot of ways. And I think that the Safdies have this courage to be gross and to be intense and to be ugly. In Good Time, they shot on film and they pushed it to stop so that it was especially grainy.
Yeah.
So for those of you who aren't familiar, basically each type of film is rated for a certain level, a certain light, and it's called speed. So you have you could have 800 speed or whatever it is, and each number is kind of designed to be within a certain light that you can either provide or find.
Yeah.
And then you can also shoot beyond that speed so that the grain of the film becomes exaggerated. So they were purposefully making me look like this kind of realistic, gritty, down in your face type movie, or down in your face. Is that a phrase? Down in your face. I don't know. I just invented it. It is now.
Yeah.
So that it's down in your face. And so anyway, Naked. And there's a great film called Meantime as well by Mike Leigh that I know that the Safdies are fond of. But I think Naked in particular has the closest connection, not only through its approach and its kind of social commentary element and its realism, but also just in the kind of the underbelly side.
All right. Yeah, I've never seen Naked.
I'm a big Mike Leigh fan.
Yeah.
Huge Mike Leigh fan. So I was really excited to see that they liked him, and that I thought, oh yeah, Naked for sure.
Well, that's a good place to jump into another puzzle piece I had. We've been talking about Good Time a bunch throughout the conversation, but also their film before it, Heaven Knows What.
Yeah.
I think both of their previous films, I think this definitely is a progression for them within the same kind of themes and same kind of same kind of film progression that they've been working in before, of just the things just continually spiraling out of control and things getting, crazier and crazier and worse on screen for the characters, and very, very kind of uneasy movies, movies that are very much interested in taking you on a ride that you maybe don't want to be a part of,
Yeah.
but kind of forcing you into them. And so I think their own work is definitely something that they're trying to, I don't want to say one up necessarily, but they're definitely trying to continue in the trend of what they've been doing in the past. So I think their own work absolutely is inspirational to what they're doing here with this one.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, like I said, my biggest worry, because I liked Heaven Knows What, and I really loved Good Time. The only thing I was a little afraid about with Uncut Gems is that they were going to start repeating themselves.
Right.
Um, and in a way that they did,
Mhm.
they did do that a little bit because they're stylists.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is they're not naturalistic directors, compared to someone like Sidney Lumet, who just appeared into all of his films. You never knew it was a Sidney Lumet film until you saw his name on the credits.
Yeah.
He worked in so many different styles to accommodate the story. And not every filmmaker, there's more stylists than there are naturalists. And the Safdies are definitely within a style. Now they are very good at it, and they have a very unique and singular style, which gives them a leg up. They're so them that
Yeah.
that's helpful. But what I was pleasantly surprised about is that that Uncut Gems was an expansion of the world that I think Good Time really brought into the universe.
Yeah.
The story was more sophisticated, I thought.
Mhm.
Good Time, I might like Good Time better. I don't know. Time will tell. I think
Yeah.
Good Time, maybe just because it was so fresh to me, I was like, wow, this is something new. And
Yeah.
that's a great feeling that I cherish. Uncut Gems did feel a lot like Good Time, so I didn't have that, oh my God, I just discovered, eureka moment or anything.
Right.
But Good Time has this, um, again, I kind of use this word inevitability about it. Good Time has a weird inevitability about it, right? It's just a guy trying to get bail money any way that he can.
Yeah.
So it just leads him from one thing to the next. The next character he meets leads him to the next, road that he takes. And it has a spontaneous quality to it, but it also feels kind of heightened and designed. And it's very straightforward.
Mhm.
To where I think Uncut Gems added another dimension to that. I think adding they read an article about how it's like one of the most Jewish films in recent memory.
Right.
And I think they wisely and did the family gathering scene where you get to meet some of his family, and then you find out the guy he owes money to is like a peripheral part of his
Sure.
family,
Yeah.
which adds to the element of the surprise at the end, because you
Yeah.
don't really know the relationship between him and the person he owes money to, or these gangsters kind of roughing him up. We don't
Yeah.
know how all that works, those interconnections work. So, yeah, I think there's actually just another layer of storytelling sophistication in Uncut Gems that I didn't see in Good Time. Not that one is worse than the other; it's just
Right.
different.
Sure.
So I was very excited that Uncut Gems wasn't just Good Time again.
Yeah.
It has definitely they're kissing cousins. There's a lot of similarities.
Right, and that's the thing, yeah, and even heaven knows what. I mean, it's they're definitely, you could tell that this is, these are filmmakers that are working in a certain kind of world,
Yeah, and I think what they really bleed is sincerity.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always criticize someone like Wes Anderson for, just as an example, is that I'm just bored because he's a great craftsman and extremely creative and very, very talented. But his movies are just kind of boring to me now because I know what to expect. And I feel like there's a wooden quality about them. I think he's lost some of his passion or lost some of his sincerity. It's almost now more style than substance.
Mhm.
So where the Safdies are so new, so hopefully this doesn't happen to them. But their films are so dripping with passion and
Yeah.
dripping with sincerity.
Yeah.
And they really are trying to say something and excavate an idea. And just because their style is slightly repetitious, it really feels like that's the way that they feel is their best instrument. That's the best way to tell a story they really believe in.
That's why when people say, what superhero movie are they gonna end up doing? It's just like, oh.
Yeah. Who says that?
People.
I'm not in all the chat rooms
Yeah.
that you are, thankfully.
You should never join any kind of chat room or Twitter or any of that stuff.
Thankfully I don't read that stuff because it
Yeah.
would just drive me crazy. Hopefully never.
Yes.
Because that's the thing, is that's what I think success is now being defined as in this industry, is like find these indie these indie savants, and then you pluck them for Ant-Man 11 or whatever, and
Yeah.
it's like, it's so sad. Can they just keep making great small movies?
I'd love an Ant-Man 11, just not by the Safdie Brothers.
Right.
So
Well, I mean,
let's keep
Ant-Man's
those
like
things separate.
Yeah, Ant-Man is the only good, superhero.
Yes.
Yeah, I picked the wrong one. Iron Man 12 or whatever.
There you go.
But but that's happening a lot. Disney plucks these like Swedish music video directors to then
Right.
helm Pirates of the Caribbean or something. You're like, what? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any. So hopefully the Safdies, I want them to continue to grow. I hope that they continue to surprise me. I know that's kind of a arrogant, ridiculous, elitist thing to say. It's not all about me, but I mean, just as an audience member, I hope to keep. I love them right now.
We love movies, man.
Yeah, I love them right now. I want to keep loving them. And the way that I would end up becoming bored is that if they just bleed that style horse too dry.
Sure. Well, what do you got next for your next puzzle piece?
I want to do 2 movies right now that they're unrelated, except for that they're part of like the neo-noir genre.
Okay.
And I want to just talk about neo-noir for 2 quick seconds. It's just kind of characterized by callbacks to true noir, like 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s noir crime stories, usually through the cinematography, like camera angles, how light is used, either through shadow play and things like that, the framing, and then really the biggest thing is like the themes of revenge and paranoia, and also the kind of the blurring of the lines between good and bad. These are all characteristics of noir that have then been kind of reframed through neo-noir, which has more modern, like 1970s and up type crime stories. So the films I want to mention are The Friends of Eddie Coyle, which is a great movie, and also Straight Time from a director called Ulu Grobar. And it was a film, kind of an underappreciated, underloved film with Dustin Hoffman.
Okay.
The Friends of Eddie Coyle and Straight Time are both these gritty 70s neo-noir crime stories that have this energy to them, this train, and they just kind of have an atmosphere that feels like the Safdies. The Safdies kind of have this great 70s Scorsese thing going,
Sure.
but I think they definitely appreciate the gems of like the 70s crime film.
Yeah.
And how that was kind of definitely an extension of the neo-noir subgenre. And I think The Friends of Eddie Coyle and Straight Time are big in that. They're just very influential films, but they're also like little nuggets that not a lot of people see, and it's a shame. I think that the Safdies are kind of, they have great taste and they pursue cinema, and so I think they definitely saw these films.
Yeah.
They definitely probably
saw these films.
Yeah, definitely probably. I love that.
I think you're probably definitely right.
But check out Straight Time and The Friends of Eddie Coyle because they're both great, kind of off the wall, a little bit more edgy, independent. No, I mean not quite independent, but lower budgeted crime films from that era.
Awesome. Well, I only got one more puzzle piece. So for my last one, there's a certain kind of movie fan who is going to go into this, has no idea what the Safdie Brothers are, or Good Time, or any of these movies, especially the ones you're bringing up, and maybe just see, oh, it's an Adam Sandler movie. And, they get,
Sure.
have that level of expertise or whatever, and are going to go into it and maybe describe it to their friends as like an Adam Sandler crank movie. So I thought of Crank, just a very silly, balls to the wall, nonstop, just crazy ass movie. Just nonstop adrenaline from beginning to end. And of course, the one thing that a lot of people take away from this movie is just how anxiety ridden it is. And you really do feel a little bit sick by the time it's over, and I certainly felt that 100%. My stomach hurt for hours after I saw this movie.
Wow.
It's like true serious anxiety by the end of this thing, and while Crank does not give you those kind of feelings, it certainly has that kind of level of nonstop craziness that you would think is the way that someone might describe that if they haven't seen these kinds of other movies. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, this is the one where his heart's going to explode unless he fights people. Right.
It's something along those lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember there's a Crank 2.
There is a Crank 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the first Crank was so successful.
Yes.
That just tells you what the marketplace is for movies. But yeah, no. I mean, of course, I think the adrenaline is a huge part of their thing.
Yeah.
They've really made that like their palette.
Yeah.
is the intensity of their films. And I actually have a couple more puzzle pieces that kind of go along with that.
Sure.
Because I have a couple. I have a lot more puzzle pieces, so I'll condense them.
Sure.
You want to just focus on energy right now? Are you going off crank?
Let's go off energy. Yeah.
Go off crank. Okay.
Yes.
That's a good launching pad. So the first one is the work of Gaspar Noé. I'm going to have to say Irreversible and Enter the Void.
Sure.
Now, Irreversible is one of the most challenging, stress-inducing films I've ever seen in my life.
I actually thought of Irreversible when I was first making my pieces list, and I did not include. I just forgot to include it, but it was on my mind. Absolutely,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and I mean, I think the energy and the intensity and the nausea Noé is that's his thing. He's really. I think he's a fearless director. I used to kind of like not like him too much. I used to think he was kind of trying too hard.
That's what he wants.
Yeah, well, he kind of has this Lars von Trier element to him, which is I feel like the more you want me to care, the less I care. You know what I mean? Lars von Trier is a real hit and miss for me. But I think I've really come to appreciate Noé a lot. I've really come around. I think that he is an artist.
Yeah.
And that he experiments, and that not all experiments work, of course, but he's a laboratory filmmaker. He tries things. But I really have ended up appreciating all of his films. And Irreversible has always stuck with me. I think it's a great film. And by great, I mean it succeeds where it wants to succeed.
Right.
It's very hard to call it great in the traditional sense because it is so savage.
Yeah.
But it really is a powerful film. And then I'd say Enter the Void only because I think that the Safdies have this kind of modern, neon, oversaturated vibe. Uncut Gems less so than Good Time.
Yeah.
Good Time is so saturated and neon colors and things.
Plus the scores that they
use. This 80s,
big new age electronica thing.
Yeah, it's very John Carpenter.
Yeah.
I was going to even mention John Carpenter. I forgot that on the list, but the music of John Carpenter is very influential. Kind of like that started with It Follows. Remember when It Follows came out and had that score? And I was like, this is so Carpenter, you know?
Hell yeah.
So they even have that vibe going. But yeah, I think Enter the Void is very abstract. It's about a drug dealer that then kind of becomes a ghost. I guess that's the easiest way to describe that film. Not the easiest movie to summarize. But anyway, so yeah, there's definitely a Noé vibe to them. The grittiness, the rawness, the intensity, and also this kind of like modern, neon-drenched, overly saturated, grainy, high-grain imagery.
Sure.
So that's big into that. The other thing I'm going to talk about in terms of intensity, this was technically my last puzzle piece, but then I'm going to bump it up, is Breaking Bad.
Okay.
The reason why I'm going to bring up Breaking Bad, and just super briefly, is because the middle sections of that show, like seasons 3 and 4, are a masterpiece of intense crime storytelling, of plot. It's not the most sophisticated show in the world. I have my gripes about the end of Breaking Bad.
Sure.
It's a great show overall, but I have my issues with it. But those middle seasons are the most taut television I've ever seen. I mean, just sweat down the back of my ass intense.
That's why everybody loves it so damn much.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you really look at it closely, I think it falls apart under intense scrutiny. I mean, it's no Sopranos. You know what I mean? It's not nearly the heft or the intelligence of a show like Sopranos. But it is very good. What it does extremely well. It's basically plot. It's like a high-octane Quentin Tarantino movie for 5 years or whatever. And it's fairly simplistic. But those middle seasons are superb in terms of their craftsmanship and their execution, and they are extremely intense. And so I think I think the reason why I want to bring up Breaking Bad, I don't know if the Safdies watched it or are personally influenced by it, but I think it gave us, as a public, an appetite for the Safdies films.
That's interesting.
I think it conditioned us to need the adrenaline.
Yeah.
And cut to black when Walt does something crazy, and it's 2 a.m. You have to be up at work at 7. You're like, I'll do one more episode.
Right.
That there was an appetite that I think Breaking Bad started, and I think the Safdies, in their more art house indie movie way, are filling that void that's left by a show that was so competently done in terms of its intensity.
That's really interesting. I like that a lot. Yeah, because it definitely it captured everybody in a way. It's just like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? And so yeah, I like that a lot.
Thank you. Now I think you're out, right?
I'm out. So you're out.
I'm just gonna mention a few quick films and just talk super briefly about them. I think it'd be a tragedy if I didn't mention the work of John Cassavetes.
Okay.
There's an excellent filmmaker named John Cassavetes, who was also an actor. He did a lot of movies as an actor, like Rosemary's Baby. He's the husband guy. to help finance his films. A film in particular is The Killing of a Chinese Bookie. This is an excellent film, one of my all-time favorite John Cassavetes films. It is essentially art crime. It is an art house crime film. It was kind of the first of its kind. John Cassavetes was a pioneer in a lot of ways. He invented American independent cinema with a film called Shadows, which then went and turned into French New Wave cinema. So Jean-Luc Godard, there wouldn't be a Jean-Luc Godard without a John Cassavetes. And when I look at The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, the grittiness, the art crime element, I think that the Safdies are more than influenced by him. Another film to mention, starring John Cassavetes, but not directed by him, is a movie called Mikey and Nicky. And this is, again, a character piece, and an intense film, an art crime film directed by Elaine May, the great underappreciated female director, Elaine May. She's an absolute genius. And then the last two movies I want to talk about, just super briefly, is an Italian film called The Moment of Truth. And this is an Italian film from 1965 about a bullfighter. And it basically has a documentary realism that I think that was deeply influenced the Safdies' approach.
I think they mentioned this on that interview I was listening to.
Boom! That's what I'm talking about. So The Moment of Truth.
Something about a bullfighter.
It's a great movie. It's an obscure film to a certain extent, but it drips out of them. It drips out of them. There's a documentary realism that I think has permeated all of their work. And the final thing I will say is kind of a weird thing. It's called The American Friend, a great movie by Wim Wenders, which is an adaptation of Ripley's Game, actually. But it's about the characters and their drive and their intentions and their ideas propelling an unconventional plot. These movies, they're unconventional in a lot of ways, and I think, again, kind of touching on what I mentioned about when you instill a character with obsession as their driving force, you can add a lot of surprise and a lot of unpredictability. And these guys, what they're proving to me in three movies I've seen of theirs is that they walk that balance of inevitability and yet totally surprising, completely unexpected. I mean, and just to kind of reiterate, to have unexpected inevitability is a real trick. And that's where, these guys are not flash in the pan. They are very talented. They are methodical, even though their films feel like haphazard and crazy and madness. And that was one of the things about a filmmaker like Rainer Werner Fassbender, a great German director. He would make movies in 11 days. He died. He made over 42 films and died at 38. A totally insane guy, but he was a stylist and there was vision. And I think these guys have that same energy and that same vision and that same drive. So, yeah, I'm pretty floored by him. So those are all my puzzle pieces. I rushed through.
Hey, we got a lot here. Let's do the finished puzzle, and we'll get to any closing thoughts. Finished puzzle. Got a lot of movies to mention here. We've got Punch Drunk Love, Hard 8, Requiem for a Dream, The Wrestler, Mother, Raging Bull, Casino, The King of Comedy, The Wolf of Wall Street, California Split, The Player, Boiler Room, Pickpocket, A Man Escaped, L'Argent, am I saying that right?
L'Argent.
2001, A Space Odyssey, Owning Mahoney, Love and Death on Long Island, Rounders, Naked, the Safdie's own Uncut Gems, the Safdie's own Good Time and Heaven Knows What, The Friends of Eddie Coyle, Straight Time, Crank, Irreversible, Enter the Void, Breaking Bad, The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, Mikey and Nicky, The Moment of Truth, and The American Friend. Damn, man. Big list of puzzle pieces. But, you said it earlier, these are cinema fans, these guys. Yeah. I mean, they really do seem to care about this stuff quite a lot. And I think that they're going to be doing a lot of really exciting stuff in the years to come.
Well, to me, again, not to sound like on my high horse or my soapbox, but this is something that plagues me that I worry about as a filmmaker. I'm a big film buff. I love movies. They're all I think about. I want to make sure that I'm putting out a genuine, authentic film of my own that doesn't just give you a tour of my movie collection.
Right.
That's the thing. Is a lot of things that irritates me about great people I think are great, very talented, is that I think they can't overcome their influences and they wear them too much on their sleeve. And the Safdies, while I think I'm a fairly trained eye, I can see some of these influences, but they never dominate.
Right.
Their vision is sincere. And that's what makes me most excited about them is, I could look at that Good Time and go, Mean Streets, in this kind of glib, superficial way.
Right.
But it's its own thing. And Good Time is its own movie.
Absolutely.
And Uncut Gems is also its own film. So as much as I came with a laundry list of movies, but never once did I feel they overwhelmed their own personal vision and their sincerity, and that's what keeps me most excited about their next movie.
They also, my last thought is that they give these actors so much to work with. Adam Sandler, I mean, just freaking phenomenal performance, character, so much exciting stuff to do. Julia Fox is amazing.
Oh yeah, breakout.
Oh my God, so good.
And that butt.
Yeah, everybody in this, like I said, Kevin Garnett, Idina Menzel, everybody in this is so damn good. But then you could say that about Good Time. You could say that about Heaven Knows What. I mean, they're really giving these actors such great stuff to work with to make some really exciting performances. And that's part of why I absolutely am on board for whatever they do next.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is so many directors and filmmakers, they really undervalue actors. They view them as the obstacle or the enemy, and I think that's a bad attitude. You know what I
Sure.
mean, I feel like the Safdies, while having very much a strong style, are very much actors directors. I mean, they have the last two great performances. Robert Pattinson was transformative.
Oh yeah.
In that role, as Connie, right? Connie.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that was, to me, that was a De Niro of our generation type performance.
It was insane.
As much as I love Adam Sandler in this, and I think he was brilliant, that performance as Connie is even more compelling to me.
Yeah.
I mean, just in the eyes of Robert Pattinson blew me away.
Yeah.
So yeah, they are actors, directors, without a doubt in my mind. And just super briefly, I'm reading a book right now called Stanley Kubrick Director. Shocking. I'm reading a book about, and but it's worth mentioning. A big misconception about him is that he was such an exacting perfectionist that everything was planned when he got to the set. And that's the thing, is that's not true at all. Stanley had no idea what he was going to shoot when he got there. And that's one of the reasons why he made people do so many takes, is because he was solving the problem of the movie visually based on the performance. He said, don't give me 50% on your rehearsal. Do it how you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And he'd see how they were going to do it. And then he'd design the movie around the performance. He was very big into this thing called the moment. Every moment, every scene, every scene of every film had to have a moment, which was like, why is the audience watching this particular piece?
Yeah.
And that came mainly from the actor's performance. And yes, that is a technique that brings a lot out of the actor. You have to give 110%, 130 takes. That's brutal.
Sure.
But his films stand the test of time, are magic. So what I think is, like, appreciate your actor. And I just thought it was an interesting tidbit, also for young aspiring filmmakers out there who are like, oh, I have to have everything figured out.
Right.
No, find your technique and find your way of doing it. And look at the Safdies give me a lot of hope as an independent film director getting ready to make my first feature film at a high level. It's exciting, and I have hope that there's people that want to see these films and companies that appreciate these voices, that they could exist.
Well, this was A24's biggest hit to date, I believe, as far as box office is concerned. So that's pretty exciting. I mean, of course, it's got a big name draw, but still.
Sure. And it has Netflix involved, right?
Yeah, I think the international release is being handled by them or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Probably because of Adam, because he's like locked in tight on
Yeah.
Netflix.
Yeah.
But they batten down that hatch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fucking Netflix worked their way into this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Of course. Well, I'm going to make one last horrible joke.
Okay.
But out of this film, I have to say that Adam was a cut gem. That's a deep Jewish joke right there.
I like it.
There you go.
I see where you're going.
He was a cut gem. I'm not going to explain it, but
okay.
You know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying. I like it. Were you? Did you just come up with that, or did you have that literally written on your notes?
No. I wrote that
Okay.
many moons ago.
Good.
When I first saw the trailer.
Beautiful.
I was like, I'm going to make a circumcised cock joke.
One day.
So fast. As soon as I can.
Well, Kris, did you see any other movies recently you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, I actually saw Dark Waters, which wasn't like a masterpiece, but it was good.
I wanted to see it so bad, I just couldn't find time. I gotta still try to see that.
It was very good. I'm interested in those kind of films. Like, even if they suffer as films, I'm so interested in the real life story that I tend to forgive it a bit.
Did you go home and throw out your nonstick pans?
Yes, I sold all of my shares in that company, in that what was it, in DuPont.
Okay.
Oh, you're gonna laugh at this. I just pulled up my list of movies that I've seen in theaters. And I guess I must have been drunk or tired or something, because instead of writing Uncut Gems, I just wrote Adam Sandler.
Yes.
No, Honey Boy.
Oh, yeah.
was actually surprisingly good.
Very good.
Very interesting. I was blown away by Ford v Ferrari, even though I was not expecting to be blown away. I think the thing for me is it was a trite, boring script, but it had great performances. And what they needed to knock my socks off was the racing sequences, and they did.
Yeah.
The racing scenes, I think, were cinematic, and that's the beauty of movies, is like that you can't do anything, you can't do that with any other art form, and they really made it. So to me, that was like a movie.
It is a movie. That's what it is.
And it was great to see in theaters.
Hell yeah. Well, Kris, why don't you tell people where they can find your work?
So you can go to KrisKrainock.com, and you can see all of the stuff that I've made, read stuff about my upcoming film, Madam X. You can also go to madamxmovie.com and get updates and see our amazing cast and crew. We're still finding cast right now and trying to put this bad boy together. And then, I'm just on the social media under my name, of course, and you can see all my posts and rants about movies that I'm seeing and watching and all that kind of good stuff. I'm still watching the BBC list from this past decade, so you guys can follow along with that. And so hopefully just keep an eye out, and hopefully I have a movie coming your way pretty soon.
Beautiful. Thanks, as always, for being here, man.
Thank you for having me. I always appreciate it.
Hey, I'm Josh Bell.
I'm Jason Harris. Hey, Josh, we're friends in real life, but we're also co-hosts on this new podcast called
Awesome Movie Year, where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies and do a deep dive looking at movies including the Best Picture winner, the biggest movie at the box office, future cult classics, and more.
Including the biggest flop. And this season, we're doing 1994. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. That could be Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify. We're all over the web as well at Awesome Movie Year on all the socials and awesomemovieyear.com. So please like us, subscribe, and if you do like us, give us a 5-star rating because we love you.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Uncut Gems. Thank you, Kris Krainock, for being here, as always. Always love having Kris on the show. And that was just a ad for Awesome Movie Year, which, by the way, comes back with its season 3 on the films of 1989 this week. So make sure to check that out. Also, coming up next week is the premiere of a new podcast that I am producing called All Rice, No Beans, right here on the All Points West podcast network. And I'm really excited about that one. It's a podcast about restaurants and restaurant owners. Stephanie Barajas, the general manager of Lindo Michoacan, a Mexican restaurant here in Las Vegas, will be interviewing her father about his story and his experiences building the Lindo Michoacan name from the ground up, while also talking to other restaurant owners about their experiences and how all of these experiences come together and tips and stuff like that for people getting into the restaurant business. It's a really interesting show and totally different from anything I've done before, but I think it's going to be great. I think a lot of people are really going to love it. You can check out All Rice, No Beans anywhere you listen to this podcast, or Awesome Movie Year for that matter. And I'm, again, just really excited about it getting out there. I do hope you all check it out. It's coming out on January 6th, this coming Monday. So make sure to check out All Rice, No Beans. And we will, of course, be back with plenty more piecing it together next week as well. We've got an episode on the top 10 movies of the decade. And then we also have regular episodes coming up too, and more special episodes, and just lots of other stuff for us to cover. So lots more piecing it together coming your way. If you do enjoy piecing it together, we really hope you're subscribed wherever it is you listen, and you can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and on Podchaser. You could also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, join the Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, and if you'd ever like to be on an episode of Piecing It Together, get in touch with me. I'm always looking for new co-hosts for the show. So with that said, I think we can close this episode out with a piece of music like we always do. And I think for a movie like Uncut Gems with such a frantic pace as Adam Sandler is racing around the city, doing the shit he's doing, getting into everything, we should play a nice, fast, upbeat, frantic kind of track. And I don't know if I've ever played this one before on the show, so perfect time to play it. This is a track called Whirlwind from my first album, Echoes in the Dark. So enjoy Whirlwind, and we'll be back. More piecing it together coming up real soon.
and all points west.